Hey everyone, I'm Pat Schlapper with Bassresource.com, and today I want to tell you about my top 5 baits for catching bass in March. You know, March is one of those times of the year where throughout a lot of the country they're starting to move up and spawn, get ready to spawn. So it's a lot of pre-spawn and spawn fish. So for me, most of my time I'm going to concentrate in that 6 foot and less. So I want baits that I can cover water with to try to find a concentration of fish, and then I'll have a couple that'll slow down, you know, and pick apart an area once I get in there. So first I'm going to start out with something, you know, like a Squarebill crankbait, something I can just chuck around wood, chuck around grass, rock, and cover a lot of water and get a lot of bites too. So crawdad color in the spring is pretty classic. I also usually have a shad pattern out too. So that's definitely going to be on the deck of my boat, a shallow running crankbait. So kind of along those same lines, if I get around more grass, then this is probably my favorite bait to throw in that time period. It's going to be a bladed jig. And 99% of the time I'm going to have the big bite Kamikaze Swimon on the back. And I'll throw this usually on 18 or 20 pound sunline fluorocarbon. And this is a rod where a technique where I really feel like the rod is very important because of the way the fish bite this bait. So this is actually an old prototype. It's a 7 foot 2 inch heavy power, but it's a moderate action. And this is actually a blended rod where it's fiberglass and graphite. This is from St. Croix, it's a Legend tournament. So it has the length to make a cast, it has the power to set the hook, but it's very parabolic, because what will happen a lot of times with a bladed jig is you'll feel that bite, and if you're using too stiff of a rod or too fast of an action a rod where it's too sensitive, you'll pull that bait out of their mouth, or you'll hook them for a second and lose them. It's really important that they get this fish get this bait deep in their mouth. So when you set the hook and that blade folds forward, you'll hook them. So this is probably my favorite way to catch them in that period. 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce, ripping it through grass, yo-yoing it through grass, fishing it around structure. You know, sometimes I'll almost drag it on the bottom, sometimes I'll burn it. Super, super versatile. Typically I'll have a shad color and I'll have a green pumpkin or a black and blue. I feel like you got to have both of them depending upon you know, what the forage is and just the water clarity too. So something shad, something black, blue, or green pumpkin. So that would be another one that I'm always going to have on my deck. The next one is going to be a jig. I have to have a jig. This is a 3/8 ounce flipping jig with a big bite chunk. I'll throw a 1/2 ounce a lot too, but something that if I get into an area where I've had a few bites on my crankbait or my chatterbait, I want to fish this around isolated cover. So as that water warms up, you know, most of the time I find that a lot of them big females, they'll really concentrate on isolated cover, whether it's something you can see with your eyes or something that you see on your electronics. A jig is just, it gets big bites, and you can throw it into some heavy cover. You know, a chatterbait and a crankbait, you kind of got to be leery around, like a lay down, stuff like that. Where this, I'll flip it right in there and just work it through, and a lot of times this is how I'll get some of my bigger bites. So this I have on a 7 foot heavy power, fast action, St. Croix physics rod, super lightweight, really sensitive, 22 pound sunline shooter. I want a pretty heavy line because I am fishing it in heavier cover. So, and you want a fast gear ratio reel, at least a 7/4, because a lot of times those fish, especially if they're really getting ready to lock on a bed, those fish will pick it up and they'll move it off really, really fast. And a lot of times they'll come straight towards you. So you need to be able to pick up that line to set the hook. So, and this has a pretty stiff weed guard. So you gotta get good contact with them to hook the fish on this. So jig, love it. Big fish bait, definitely got to be on the deck in March. Oh, another one that I always have out in March is going to be a jerkbait, a suspending jerkbait. This is a deep model, Megabass Vision 110. I'll typically have the standard one out too, or a variety of other, you know, mid-range diving jerk baits. Something, especially if you're in clear water, or you're around, you know, grass edges, or some of that isolated cover that I was talking about earlier, where maybe it's out off the bank a little further. There's a lot of drawing power to a jerkbait to get those fish to come out of a tree, to come off of a stump, to come out of a clump of grass. You know, you can get that thing right over the top of it and almost tease them out of there. So jerkbait is definitely got to be on your deck in March. And a lot of people only think it's good in clear water, and it does shine in clear water, but it also works in dirty water situations. You just want to change up your colors and go with more of a white and chartreuse, something that's going to stand out in that dirty water. So jerkbait is something you definitely want to have out. And then the last one, which I think, you know, anytime you're in shallow water, pre-spawn, spawn, you have to have a Wacky rig. I mean, it's the simplest rig out there, just a 5-inch stick bait. This is a big bite sensation, 5-inch stick bait. And it, for whatever reason, throughout all the years, when they won't bite anything else, you can get bites on this. Skipping it under trees, skipping it under docks, throwing it next to cover, casting it out in the open. I mean, I love throwing this just on a grass flat. You know, if you get it on a grass flat where you say you've caught some on a chatterbait, you've caught some on a crankbait, and they kind of stop biting, it's painful to throw this thing out and fish it as slow as you have to, but it gets bites, you know, and not only on cover, but out in the open too. So this I throw on the hook is a number 1. This is actually a VMC Nico hook, and I like the weedless. I like the weedless with the fluorocarbon weed guard. I don't really like metal weed guards. I like the fluorocarbon weed guard. And it's a stiff enough wire where you can kind of lean on them, but it's still thin enough where you don't have to have, you know, a giant hook set to bury the hook. I always will throw it on braid, typically 16-pound Sunline SX1 braid, and then I'll tie it to a 14 or 16-pound Sunline shooter leader. Now, a lot of people ask, like, why do I throw such a heavy leader? I mean, there are scenarios where maybe I would go down to a 10 or a 12, but I've found over the years that it doesn't matter as much as people think in a lot of scenarios with that leader thickness. And I want that extra power where if I get up under a dock and I hook one of those big pre-spawn females, I want to have the confidence that I can put as much force on it as I want to get it out of there. When you have like a 10-pound leader, you got to be really, really careful. If you're out in the open water, that's fine, but if I'm around cover or I'm around real big fish, I'm a 14 or 16-pound leader. That's what I like to use. And I throw that on a 610 medium power, extra fast St. Croix Legend Extreme, and a 25 or a 3000 size reel. And then the main line is 16-pound Sunline SX1. So that's kind of my go-to on the Wacky setup. It's like I said, it's probably my least favorite to fish out of the ones I've listed, just because you have to fish it so slow, and I like to kind of cover water that time of the year. But if I find an area where there is fish, and I've caught a few of them and I know they're there, I'm going to throw the Wacky rig because I know I'll get a few extra bites.